welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here at the Navy League's annual Sea, Air, Space Conference and Trade Show outside Washington, D.C. and National Harbor, Maryland, where our coverage is sponsored by Fincantieri, Huntington Ingalls Industries, and Leonardo DRS. And we're over here at Huntington Ingalls Industries to talk to the relatively new president of the Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company, Jennifer Boykin.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks very much for taking time to speak with us.
Absolutely.
So last I checked, the Navy's got an RFP out that was released last month, and it's asking you guys pretty much, I'm not sure if it's a broad industry announcement, it's pretty much focused on you guys, to come out with a proposal for a two-ship buy for Ford-class aircraft carriers in the Navy's continuing drive to try to take cost out of that program.
Right.
So from your standpoint, we ran into you at the Aircraft Carrier Industrial Base Coalition,
right,
where pretty much the entire carrier team was sort of making a case about why this is good. Why is this deal such an important deal from your perspective?
The two-ship buy really provides a lot of stability, not just to the workforce at Newport News, but really across the entire industrial base. And from that standpoint, it is a great value for the American taxpayers. And it's not just the two-ship buy, but it's the two-ship carrier buy on closer centers. So otherwise, if we build carriers on a 5-year center, we really have kind of a valley of our workforce. We hire, they build, and and our workforce attrits, and then we wait to start CVN 81, hire, build, and train. Bringing the centers closer on a two-ship buy really kind of allows us to keep that workforce stable, and there's a lot more learning. Secondly, on a two-ship buy, you really have a single technical baseline, so you're spending less on engineering, and you have a single build plan, so you're spending less on planning. And then the other component really is you're buying, like at Costco, you're buying quantity of two from the industrial base. And so there's material savings really for the entire two-ship set worth of material.
What are some reasonable ways, aside from the economic order quantity of it, right? We talked to Admiral Moore, Vice Admiral Moore, who's commander of the Naval Sea Systems Command, NAVSEA, and his case was, look, let's look at the Nimitz program and how we bought ships there,
right,
and how we managed to get cost out of the ships. From your perspective, how much cost do you think just doing that deal will take out from your standpoint? Not that I'm trying to get you to put sort of bid specific
right, sure.
But from a, if somebody wants to wrap their mind around it and critics want to look at it, and say, well, the Ford class was $13 billion, you could say the number was actually bigger in some cases, but we also did that ship very badly, and I want to ask you lessons learned, because you were the technology chief and the engineering chief of the company, so you drew a lot of lessons from that. But how much of an order of magnitude savings is this? Is this 10% per ship, bigger per ship? Even before you engage in sort of deeper cost-cutting initiatives, which I want to talk about.
Right, sure. Well, let me address your question on Ford first. Clearly, Ford, first new aircraft carrier design in over 40 years, first of a class. And so also, as in shipbuilding, it's kind of your prototype. There's a lot of new technologies on Ford, and there was a lot we learned both during the build, but also of the testing of all the systems on Ford. The good thing about that is all of those lessons have been rolled into CVN 79. So we sort of think about this as, we designed Ford differently, and that gave us a lot of opportunity to reduce the cost and make really an asset that the Navy needs and the nation needs. We're building 79 differently based on all of those build lessons learned, and we believe that's going to carry over into test. And so really the next opportunity to take cost out is to buy differently. And so the 80-81 two-ship buy, I think you could think about that. What we've seen in Nimitz class with the two-ship buys was, those were our 4 least costly carriers in the Nimitz class, and it equates to roughly, you could think about a 10% over the cost of 2 ships. And so that makeup again is labor efficiencies, material economic order quantity.
And for something that big, that's extra ships for the Navy or extra money that they can spend in another way. You mentioned doing things differently, and each ship is really different as much as you want to standardize them, right? And especially in the Ford class, because the Ford had such a long gestation process where you guys were doing work. We weren't sure if the emails were going to work and the rest. There were a whole bunch of challenges as you were building the ship, and so you guys did make some design changes. Talk to us about some of the changes, as you went to 79 and to 80, and then all of the other things you're considering to further take cost out. How much labor can you take out of the design of these ships, in addition to whatever cost savings you get from a block buy?
So the labor savings isn't really in the design of the ship; it's in the production of the ship. Um, so for the two ship buy, I mean, the idea, part of the cost savings really is a single technical baseline. So the idea is you sort of lock in a single technical baseline, and you really, working with the Navy, you're very specific about any changes to 81 against 80, because part of the benefit of kind of running that assembly line, if you will, is a single technical baseline. Now, with all of the, the technology on the Ford, we know there's going to be obsolescence, and there's ways to deal with that. But the idea really is not to change the design. 80 and 81 would really be, built to the same technical baseline.
What are some of the changes you guys made based on lessons learned, when you went from Ford to Kennedy and from Kennedy to Enterprise?
Right. So the biggest difference is in how we're building the Kennedy. We were, about 60% complete with the design of Ford when we started building Ford. When we started Kennedy, we had the benefit of a complete ship design. So we actually built it by bringing a lot of the work into the shop environment. In shipbuilding, we live with this 1-3-8 rule. If it costs an hour in the shop, it costs 5 hours on the platen, and it costs 8 hours in the dock. So we've moved a lot of work left. We're doing a lot more pre-outfitting, and that's really what's enabling us to be on the path to a 18% man-hour reduction for Kennedy as compared to Ford.
You were the technical and engineering chief of the company before you fleeted up to the big job in July of last year, and so you were one of the people who was looking at what all the trade-offs are, the innovation trade-offs to make, and the investment it takes to take money out, right? You have to spend money to save money, ultimately. Talk to us about the process you guys use to determine how much automation to invest in, how much, because as much
the yard,
as
you're asking.
in the yard, because it is a very labor-intensive industry, but there
Sure.
are a whole series of technological developments. They were digitally designed ships, so you have that.
Right.
We're in giant rolls of paper anymore, but. Talk to us about that trade-off, how you guys think about it, because even though I think you have a very understanding chief executive who believes in investment, at the end of the day, he's also running a publicly traded company where, the shareholders want return for their money. So talk to us about, what are the enabling technologies, what are the interesting technologies, and how you make that decision of what to invest in and what not to invest in.
Sure. Well, so my top priority since I've come in 1 July of last year has been, people and technology. And so our investing is really investing in both our people and technology, and investing in technology in such a way that our workforce helps identify what's the best use of technology that can help us be more efficient and really help improve the work environment in which they're working. So a lot of our investments have been like in the Joint Manufacturing Assembly Facility, which we're building in the North Yard. It's bringing all the automation, the weld equipment set up, overhead cranes, really in one place under roof, so that the workforce in there is working with both automated equipment, but they're working in an environment that allows them to be more efficient. With the investments in our integrated digital shipbuilding, which I think you mentioned, that's really, again, we designed Ford in a three-dimensional product model. And what we're doing is we're investing in technology in a way that helps us take advantage of that. So imagine, you design the carrier in a product model, so you can see it three-dimensionally on your screen when you're in the engineering building. But then we go print paper drawings, and we hand paper drawings and paper work packages to a team of, a production team,
Right.
and they have to, in their mind, go backwards from two-dimensional to imagining three-dimensional and building.
Right.
Our investment is literally giving them that design on a tablet. So instead of giving the work team paper drawings, the work team will have, the three-dimensional piece of the model that they need with work instructions, embedded videos, think YouTube, videos, so that they can build the ship and they can actually see what they're building. And the workforce is actually helping us to decide what those right investments are, what more information they need, and what works and what doesn't. And so it's as important as the investment itself, as important as the technology is itself, is the way we're doing that by empowering the work teams to define what it is that they need and what will help them become more efficient.
Are there things as you look 5 to 10 years downstream that you're already identifying that these are revolutions or changes that are happening in broader manufacturing, heavy manufacturing industries, that are things that we've got to think about bringing into the yard.
Sure.
And then how those needs in turn drive your technical school, which is actually one of the most selective schools in the country. Ivy Leagues think they have, tight selection rates, whereas your
The apprentice school.
apprentice school is,
Right.
it's an incredible education, but it's also a highly selective,
Right.
school.
Right. Well, so, as you mentioned, I mean, industry is going through this industrial revolution. And so we are working with a lot of high-tech companies, and we're figuring out, what's the best way to use things like data analytics and, AI to help the process of shipbuilding. So, you can imagine, using a machine, having the computer help someone who can visualize an entire production line and visualize how that works and enable the decision maker to make immediate decisions with real-time data that drives efficiency. Much like the way that we all use some of the apps when we're driving through traffic and we're getting real updates on, hey, there's an accident here, go left instead of right. We're really looking at how we use that same technology of data analytics and AI to help really make our production lines more efficient.
Do you have any sense at this point quantitatively how effective that might be?
No, it's too early, but I will tell you that I completely believe that it will disrupt the business. I believe that our business is in the beginning stages of a transformation, a digital transformation. We're partnering with companies who have done that. We're learning a lot as we go, and with the incoming workforce that we have, their pace of innovation and their pace of change really can be logarithmic. We just have to make sure that we're listening and paying attention and investing in the right things.
There's always been a robust debate about the aircraft carrier and challenging the assumption, whether or not, as it's been for the last 70 years, that it should be at the center of a future fleet. And given a whole bunch of great power weapon systems that are being developed, for example, anti-carrier weapons, for example, that China's heavily investing in, there's a lot of discussion at almost all levels of the Navy leadership about should the big deck nuclear powered aircraft carrier be at the center of those future plans? Should we be looking at other sort of fleet constructs at the end of it? Almost all the Navy leaders we've spoken to here on the record have said, no, we do think that it's important to have that debate and discussion, but for the foreseeable future, that the big deck nuclear powered aircraft carrier and the Ford design is the one they seem to like the Ford design, so you've got that going for you. But at the same time, Senator McCain has pushed this debate about smaller aircraft carriers. There are study groups all over the Navy who are suggesting, well, maybe something smaller and that's conventionally powered. From your standpoint, pretty much anything we build, the Navy decides you're ultimately going to build, which is something that Mike Petters, I think, pretty wisely told me some time ago. It's up to the customer. But from your standpoint, what are the puts and takes on that debate? As you participate in that debate, what's the voice that you're adding to that as folks start to theorize, get really theoretical about the future?
Well, obviously we do stay very close with the Navy, and our objective is to make sure that they have the assets that they need. And it's the Navy is doing mission definition. We're not. But there's a couple things I think to keep in mind. And even the RAND study, which came out with the 4 carrier options, the first 2 are sort of variants of Ford class. Ford was designed, it actually has 2.5 times the power generation capability of a Nimitz class. And so, there's, as you think about the future and what might come, be it laser weapons or whatever, there's a lot of power capability on the Ford class that can be used for whatever the Navy needs in the future. So that's one thing that I think is really important, is the capability of the Ford class. The other, though, is that it is designed in a three-dimensional product model, and in leveraging from the Ford, if there are trade-offs that the Navy decides to make based on mission or based on cost, we can actually do that from the Ford design, unlike we could do from the Nimitz design, because we didn't have a three-dimensional model. But I think the capabilities of the Ford are, it's even hard to compare to the Nimitz. And as we're really coming through, what are the best opportunities for the Navy to take advantage of the capabilities of the Ford? I think it's hard to imagine that there's going to be a better option. And the final thing I would say is that there's a design time. And so, when I listen to CNO, I listen to Admiral Richardson, and he talks about mission needs. It's really, the Navy that we need today and the Navy that we need, tomorrow. So any new design really sort of puts a gap in production. And I think we have a better opportunity working with the Navy to continue to build the Ford class, and then use the platform that we have to make the trade-offs so that we actually keep the production of carriers going, so that we give the Navy the best chance to get to the 12 carrier fleet.
And there's also a design cost, isn't there? I mean, because folks have a tendency of proposing these ideas as if you can sort of pull another design out of whole cloth. I mean, how much did the Ford cost?
Right. So
design?
so that's a very good point. I mean, the gap in production from design is both the time it takes to design and the cost it takes to design. And depending on if it's a clean sheet design, I mean, it's probably a few $1 billion depending on what you're looking at. But it's years. It's years where you're designing the new platform, and again, depending on what the Navy needs, we're gonna support the Navy. But there are options, and even the RAND study refers to options that are variants from Ford as we go. I think as the Ford serves in the fleet, I think we're going to be really impressed with the capabilities of that ship. I mean, she's a crown jewel.
Let me ask you a submarine question. Okay. It's a great time for the submarine. Everybody acknowledges, has always understood the importance of it. There's a drive. You're now at a run rate of 2 ships per year. But there has been slippage in schedule deliveries. You guys started very, very strong and was the poster child of a very successful program. But then there was an upward ramp, and what you get paid is highly dependent on that. Bring us up to speed on how you guys are going to get a jump, and with your partner Electric Boat,
Sure.
work to close that gap, especially as you guys are looking now and really starting to do the work on Columbia. That brings you up to 3 ships a year technically, depending on how you want to look at it, given the amount of work that will be absorbed by that program. So talk to us a little bit about how you're thinking on the submarine piece of the equation.
Sure. Well, with our partner Electric Boat, I mean, we collectively were a little slow getting out of the gate on Block 4, as both companies are getting up to the run rate of two submarines per year. We were kind of slow getting material, but boat over boat since the beginning of the class, as you mentioned, I mean, the delivery cycle has gotten shorter and shorter. The good thing is, though, as we prepare for Block 5, we've got the advanced funding. The material looks in good condition, and so collectively, we believe we're going into Block 5 in a much better place than we were in Block 4, starting Block 4.
And let me ask you about ship repair. One of the things that Vice Admiral Moore talked about was the importance of much more repair capability within the Navy, but also in the private yards. And we've looked at the horror stories of submarines that have sort of backed up, and then there was that proposal for industry to come in and try to work on that nuclear submarine backlog where, I mean, some ships were behind by like 800 days or so. Talk to us a little bit about what kind of investment you're making, what kind of roadmap you want to see from the Navy, because Admiral Moore has said, look, I mean, industry's not going to invest without a roadmap from us. We have the nuclear roadmap we've done. We're going to do the conventional roadmap. What's the input you're giving him about what you want to see from them that in turn will shape the investment you make in sort of that repair capability, and God forbid in a crisis situation, the amount of surge capability that has to be there as well,
Sure.
to repair ships.
Well, so we have invested in our submarine maintenance part of the shipyard, and as you know, right now we have USS Helena in and USS Columbus in, and we're planning right now for the Boise when she arrives later this year. So we have been talking with the Navy. We have that capability. We've invested in the facilities, and also we've come up a ramp of hiring and sort of a workforce that is knowledgeable now of submarine fleet maintenance. And so we have been talking with the Navy about the best way to balance that work to make sure that we sort of keep the workforce that we have doing submarine availabilities steady, and to help alleviate the burden on the public yards. So we've made investments in our people, and we've made investments in our facility, and we really are in a good position to help continue to do submarine maintenance.
But what about for future repair and excess capability? What do you see there in terms of having a little bit of extra margin?
I think what we've invested in from a facilities and a workforce standpoint kind of creates the margin I think that the Navy may need for submarine maintenance and availability. And so, we've got dry docks and piers that are really designated for that work. And as long as we have those facilities and the workforce, I think there's an opportunity for the Navy to take advantage and, sort of level load the work.
The first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the USS Enterprise, now the Enterprise, was built in Newport News, and at the end of her long, illustrious career as the coolest aircraft carrier in the Navy, with all of her 8 reactors and all of the other cool features she had, and also beautiful lines. And anyway, talk to us a little bit about what's next. The ship was decommissioned. She came to you for a whole bunch of key work. The plan was then to tow her to Bremerton for scrapping. We've not heard any news. There's been no papal smoke about what's going to happen, because there is a strong cadre in the Navy that argues, hey, we should just leave it here at Newport News and do that work there, especially since the island is supposed to go to Pensacola to the Naval Aviation Museum. Talk to us a little bit about where we are on that process. Is the ship going to stay there? Is the ship going to move?
Well, I don't know what the future holds there. I will tell you that she is at the yard at Pier 2. We've submitted a caretaker proposal, which really means we'll take care of the ship here at Pier 2 at Newport News Shipbuilding until the Navy makes a final decision. And I don't want to venture to guess where that will end up, but obviously across the Huntington Ingalls capabilities, we can play a role in helping take the ship to the end of her glorious life.
And that will be an even sadder day. But fortunately, a part of her will continue to survive. Jennifer Boykin, president of Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company, still
Right.
a very, very cool name for the company. Ma'am, thank you very much for
Absolutely.
spending so much time with us.
Yeah, thank you very much. My pleasure.